everyone, to the new and improved Verdict series. I'm Matt Watkins, and I'll be your host. We've made this available to all people. It is a public recording. It is open to everyone. For our new listeners, Rockham Plus is a new subscription service that we've started. It's exclusive content for our subscribers. It includes in-depth analysis, recruiting information. The subscriber format has allowed us to add additional subscriptions to our palette, if you will, one of which has allowed us unparalleled access to game film. We're able to do things with this service that no one else does that covers Mizzou hoops. And we're doing it in order to bring you more in-depth analysis and better coverage than we believe anyone else can provide. And the move to a subscriber service obviously requires a little bit of cash outlay on behalf of our subscribers, but we reinvest that money back into services to provide you with what we feel is the best content. That aside, we're going to move right into this week's verdict, and it's a special one. It's edition number 6, and it is the Border War. We'll start off with, the vibe check. How are we feeling about this game? I said it coming into the Memphis game, and I think the same is true. This game was an opportunity. It wasn't a game Mizzou had to have to achieve any reasonable goals this year. Yes, it was an opportunity to notch a marquee win in the resume, the NCAA tournament resume. Yes, it was an opportunity to show that last year's winless SEC slate was a thing of the past. But mostly for me, and I think for most other people, it was an opportunity to get fans back on board with what Dennis Gates is doing with Missouri basketball. For those of you who've read my content over the last 2 years, you know that I've tended to kind of defend Dennis Gates with a lot of the things he was doing. He's caught some flack, and I'll admit some of it was deserved. But what we've seen with him doing, what he's doing on the recruiting trail, both in the portal and in high school, he's done very well acquiring high-level talent that can play and win at this level. We've had a lot of conversation about game schemes. What he's doing, what they're doing offensively, what they're doing defensively, rotations, all of that. I think what he's done made a lot of sense in the past, even though it didn't lead to results last year. So, I think this game was an opportunity for him to kind of have a proof of concept for what he's doing. The team that he has now is very different than year one. It's much more emblematic of what we saw at Florida State in years past. You've got length, you've got athleticism. You're a very physical team that gets to the line, gets to the rim, really plays well inside. So I think Sunday's game was kind of a coming out party for what Dennis Gates has in mind for what Mizzou basketball can be. So Sunday afternoon, perhaps more than any other game we saw, it was Mizzou's biggest home game of the year. Kansas will always be that. It was a blood feud against that spans generations against a team that has the bluest shade of blood. They came in ranked number 1. They won a national championship just several years ago. It was in front of a raucous crowd that drew rave reviews from everyone I've talked to who was there. The crowd, the environment was top notch. It was high level college basketball. And I think within all of that, Mizzou kind of experienced a rebirth, so to speak. Every generation has their border war moment. And I think this game provided Dennis Gates and this generation of Mizzou students and fans that moment. I would say the vibe check right now is sky high. Before we get into the film, I want to talk a little bit about some of the players and some of the aspects, the statistical aspects of the game that I found really interesting. We have to start off with Tamar Bates. Kid grew up half hour away from Allen Fieldhouse, Kansas native, went to Indiana, came back to Mizzou after his sophomore year, has strong family Mizzou ties. He showed out yesterday. He scored 29 points, grabbed 5 steals in 34 minutes. He was just a fantastic player yesterday, and he has been for much of his career. He was great last year, even when Mizzou was struggling. But much like it was a coming out party for Mizzou basketball, it was for Tamar Bates as well. He's been named SEC Player of the Week. Many national pundits have named him their National Player of the Week. He really drew focus on himself in both a positive way and a way that helped the team win. And I think his performance Sunday will go down among some of the greats that we talk about years past. Marcus Denton, Zaire Taylor, Keon Dooling, Corey Tate, Melvin Booker, Anthony Peeler. They all had big moments against Kansas, and that's aside from being great players, that's what we remember them for. The border war has its own little section of lore where guys who really perform well are remembered for what they did in those moments. And I think Tamar Bates will go down in that same vein. Mark Mitchell, another Kansas kid that came home after his sophomore year at Duke. He wasn't as heralded in the box score yesterday. He had a good game. I thought he did a lot of good things, especially defensively. He got to the line a lot. But what he's going to be remembered for, at least for me, and I think for everyone else, should be the absolute stones that it took for him to knock down the biggest shot of the game, which eventually won Mizzou the contest. They finished the game on an 11-4 run from that point, and he struggled with the jumper, and the fact that he was able to knock that down was just fantastic. Everyone else deserves accolades as well. I don't have time to list every one of them here to get what I want to get to, but it was a true team effort. Everyone did exactly what they needed to do to help Mizzou pull out a win. So what I want to do now is talk about some of the interesting statistical factoids. Data Mizzou, we can't overlook that aspect. So let's take a look at some of these things. What I'm showing you here is a Bill Self preparation time spreadsheet. And I looked back over the last few years, and I wanted to kind of get an idea. I really respect Bill Self as a basketball coach. I also have a strong dislike for him just based on where he coaches. But when you give him ample time to prepare for a game, his teams are almost unbeatable. And that really is shown here in this exhibit, we'll call it, with 4+ days of rest. And by 4 days, I mean 4 days in between games. Self's Jayhawks are 33-2, or have been 33-2, and they average score margin in their games is a plus 12.3. They simply do not lose games when they have that many days. This week, unlike years past, a little bit shorter rest period. There were only 3 days. He's not been quite as good in those games. 15-10, very similar average opponent rank, and the score margin drops to 4.4 points. That is a big difference, and I think Mizzou may have benefited a little bit from that. That's not taken away from anything Mizzou did, but it just helps add some context. And that really comes into play with what I'm about to show you here. I went back 10+ years, 10 full seasons and this season, and I looked back at some of the statistical outliers that Mizzou was able to pin on Kansas yesterday. First of all, Kansas offensive turnover rate. That's amount of turnovers divided by total possessions. They had 22 turnovers in 73 possessions. That equals out to a 30.1% turnover rate. That is the 5th highest in that time frame. That is 365 games that I looked through. That is the 5th highest turnover rating, that any opponent has forced Kansas into. And if you look at here, when that happens, Kansas generally loses the game. They did win one against Iowa State, who, interestingly enough, Caleb Grill was playing for. But number 5, over 10.5 years. That's incredible. And what's even more incredible is they did it again in another category. Kansas defensive free throw rate. That's Missouri's amount of times they got to the line, free throws divided by field goals. That is free throw rate. Kansas yielded a 59.6% free throw rate to Mizzou yesterday. That's an incredibly high number. It's even higher than Mizzou's season average, and that is the 8th highest rate that Kansas has given up over this 365 game sample. Granted, when you look at some of these results, Kansas tended to win more of those than they lost, but when you combine that with the turnover rate, Mizzou was able to do something to Kansas yesterday that basically no team has ever done. They just hammered them defensively with turnovers, and they hammered them offensively getting to the line. It was just an incredible job by Dennis Gates and his staff to really outmaneuver Bill Gates and be able to secure what turned out to be a pretty comfortable win, although I will admit it did get a little hairy there towards the end. The last thing I want to go over is just a couple things. We talked about this last week. In the categories here, we have Missouri's offensive pick and roll percentage. We've got Mizzou's priors, that's their usage and efficiency coming into the game. Kansas priors, which are Kansas numbers coming into the game. And you see the usages here in this first line. Mizzou really hammered the pick and roll game against Kansas. Uh, the efficiency wasn't quite as high as Mizzou's used to, but it was considerably higher than Kansas has given up in the games they played this year already. So you really like to see that. And then you look at Mizzou's defensive pick and roll defense, and you're seeing a similar story here. Although Mizzou was able to kind of really reduce the amount of times Kansas was able to go to that look, and they did hold them below their season efficiency on that. We already discussed the turnover rate uh, with Mizzou and Kansas. Those were their marks coming in. Mizzou forced opponents into turnovers 22.8% of times. Kansas only turned it over 13.1%. Mizzou more than doubled Kansas turnover rate, which is, again, a crazy number. And then finally, uh, Kansas rim offense. Their usage there was very similar to what Mizzou's given up and what Kansas has gained offensively. And what we're talking about with rim percentage is amount of shots coming at the rim. But when you look at the efficiency, Mizzou was really able to do a good job buttoning down the inside and not give Kansas easy baskets. And that was very well done, a very well done defensive job. So what we're going to move on now to is the film discussion, the film component of this. And what I want to talk about today is what they were able to do against Kansas defensively. It's very rare. Yet Mizzou was able to pull it off. And when I look at it, and I look through some of this film putting this together, I saw a lot of very similar plays that Kansas leans on when they need points, and Mizzou is able to shut them down and shut them down effectively. It's, Bill plays his favorite hits, Bill Self, that is. He likes to go to these plays when they're struggling. He likes to go to these plays when they're successful. And Mizzou was able to get inside the game and stay a step ahead of what he was doing and be able to shut all this down. And it was incredible stuff. So we're gonna go ahead and move over to the new exhibit, and that is the film. There were three key points that I really believe that were important in this game. First of all, defensive intensity. Mizzou wanted to disrupt what Kansas was doing. And that's kind of point two, is that their disruptiveness was going to take Kansas out of the game. So when you look at the intensity, the hustle, the physicality, they wanted to take Kansas out of what they were typically doing. Finally, they really wanted to impose their physical will from the get-go, and that you really saw Mizzou be able to do that time and time and time again. But I want to play this first clip here of a sequence of clips that's going to prove these few points that really shows how much Mizzou really wanted to address the physicality concern. And Mizzou so far has really relied on Anthony Robinson to kind of be their tone setter. And once again, he delivered early in the game. In a game that they were looking to impose their will physically, he led the charge. And this is what I consider a little bit of a feel me moment. Anthony Robinson, kind of Mizzou's tone setter. DeJuan Harris, Kansas tone setter from Columbia, Missouri. Here's a clip early in the game where we really see that take place.
I actually want to feel the rivalry.
We bring the boom. That's what we do.
As you can see here, Anthony Robinson on the break has all sorts of options here. Pause it right here. He has plenty of time to make a move around DeJuan Harris, get to the rim, try and get a foul, get a basket. Instead, he puts Harris with the photographers. That was clearly a message to me. Mizzou in this game wanted to be the more physical team, and as you can see at the end of that clip, it ignited a little skirmish that got the teams together. But I really think that was Ant's way of saying, "Feel me. I'm going to be here all game." We're going to move on now to the more defensive side of things. And before we get here, I want to stop. This area right here, that we call this the nail. Mizzou owned this area between the free throw arc and the logo. Anytime one of Kansas' big men got inside that area, Mizzou owned it. And here's a perfect example of that. Again, early in the game, Mizzou's going to go through a little bit of switching on defense. Their flow was really good. Solid handoffs between defensive players. And we're going to see Dickinson come up here to the nail. I want you to watch Anthony Robinson. He's just waiting for him to put the ball on the floor. Takeaway number one. Very similar play coming up here. This is going to be KJ Adams at the elbow. They're going to run a big-to-big screen and roll. And this is just a pick and roll between two big men. Watch Anthony Robinson. Nope, you're not doing that. This time we're going to see a slot pick and roll. Set up here. You're going to see Adams do a short roll. Sorry, I went a little too far. KJ Adams is known for doing what's called short rolls. Instead of rolling all the way to the basket, he's going to roll here. And that will give him the ability to put the ball on the floor and get to the rim. Watch Tony Perkins. Same spot, not allowing their big men to dribble out of the high post. They do not get the takeaway here immediately, but I want you to watch the recovery. Right here. This is a patented Bill Self play. Two big men on the floor. It's going to be a big-to-big, high and low. Mizzou's already prepared. Josh Gray is prepared. Anthony Robinson is fronting KJ Adams, and Tony Perkins is going to come over to help. Kansas was getting nothing early out of these looks. And this is what Bill Self wants to do. He wants to get his big men involved. Again, we're in the circle here. This time Aiden Shaw is playing defense. And at this point, Kansas was all out of sorts. They were really struggling with getting anything going, and this didn't help. And what we're going to see here is another example of a high-low play. This is where Kansas is looking to get a high seal on one of Mizzou's defensive players. And we're going to run it through, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Here's the seal. Right in the paint. He's going to try and seal Trent Pierce high side. And what Mizzou was really able to do early on in this game, and this is a perfect example of it, is we've talked so much about the Florida State model. And what the Florida State model is really is disruptiveness on the defensive end in the half court. And what that requires is athleticism, it requires length, and it just requires size. And Mizzou, up until this point, really hasn't had it. But when they are able to roll these lineups like we're seeing in these first few pieces of film here, that's when they can really be disruptive. So in this next clip, I want you to watch Peyton Marshall and Hunter Dickinson. We talked a little bit earlier about Anthony Robinson with his feel me moment. This is Peyton Marshall's. Watch the two of them here. Peyton does a really good job of corralling the ball handler in this pick and roll on the side. He is not going to allow DeJuan Harris to penetrate. Harris is going to go back out, try it again. Marshall's still in good position. Mizzou's defender gets hung up a little bit here on Hunter Dickinson. He's got his patented arm around the shoulder, committing an offensive foul that went uncalled. But Tamar Bates is going to eventually be able to recover, which was allowed 100% by Peyton Marshall's defense out here. Mitchell had helped over to take away Dickinson on the roll, and Tamar Bates is able to get the takeaway. Again, just getting hands-on passes. There's not a whole lot of breakdown on this next one. This is just Anthony Robinson being Ant. We talked about getting hands on passes. Again, nothing special here from a schematic standpoint, just great pass denial. The ball was called off of Kansas. I'm not sure if it actually was, but Mizzou again got a turnover. And this is all first half footage. This is how much Kansas was out of sorts. We look at the score. It's 30-17 at this point. Mizzou is just taking Kansas out of what they're doing. And the thing that I was really impressed with is so many of these things that Kansas was doing are the things that they do so well and have done so well over the last 2 decades. And we talked about the Florida State model. Here's a great example. Everyone has to get back. We've got Tony Perkins here matched up on power forward KJ Adams. This is a mismatch. Kansas knows it. Hunter Dickinson's going to want to call it out. Right here. He's got the high seal. This is a patented high-low play. Tony Perkins, Mizzou's point guard, 6'4", is able to get up and make the steal. Yeah. Here's one of my favorite clips, and the reason why it's one of my favorites is because this is one of KU's patented plays. They're not the only ones that run it, but they run it at least once a game from what I can remember. It's what's called a blind pig play. I'm not sure why it's called that, but it is. Basically, the point of this play, and they're going to disguise it with a box set here, is they're going to go 4 high along the free throw line. They're going to enter the pass to Hunter Dickinson, and this was 100% in response to how well Missouri had been pressuring the ball. This is what's called a pressure breaker. It helps burn off some of the Mizzou's defensive intensity and overplays. What they're going to do is Mayo's going to try and fake out and then go back door. Bates knows it's coming. Had it covered. This play works like a dream against teams that are pressuring, and yet Mizzou still had the defensive responsibility, the defensive, what's the word I'm looking for? We'll just go with responsibility. They knew what they were supposed to do. They had the patience, they had the wherewithal, and they also had the scouting report down to a T. We're going to see a slot pick and roll here. Again, when the ball gets here, watch what happens. Robinson goes over and digs down, doesn't get the turnover immediately, but causes the ball to be jarred loose. Mark Mitchell, very adeptly and was very aware on that play, was able to get a hand on the pass and convert it into a turnover for Mizzou. So we moved to the second half now. We can call this play the Tamar Bates, and that's a strong pun. Tamar is lurking here in the paint. Josh Gray is out on KJ Adams. It's hard for Adams to see what's going on here weak side. Between Mark Mitchell and Josh Gray, his vision is obstructed, and Tamar Bates is just laying in the weeds here waiting for this pass to happen. Tamar gets 2 points going the other way. Another great play. This isn't a design play, obviously, coming off of an offensive rebound. But again, we're talking about this area. Any time that Kansas big men got their hands on the ball around here, it was just a nightmare for them. And Anthony Robinson displays excellent hustle here to get the back tip and get the turnover. We're going to see this play morph into a slot pick and roll. And what I want you to watch is what's happening off the ball down here in the paint. There's the pick and roll. Dickinson is sealing Mark Mitchell here, and he's eventually going to try and seal Josh Gray. Fortunately for Mizzou, Gray is in great defensive coverage here. And when it goes a little bit further, Dickinson has to switch off. And that allows Mark Mitchell to come in and, again, do what Florida State does. Get hands on balls, whether it's on the passes or on the shots. He was able to do that here. And I want to point out Peyton Marshall. He didn't play a lot in the last game, but when he did, he played well. And this is him hustling back in transition to get the block shot. And you notice both Tio Barrett and Peyton Marshall on the floor together. And this is in the second half of a rivalry game with about 12 minutes to go. The fact that they were able to give Mizzou good minutes, especially defensively, I thought was a huge part of Mizzou's game. Mizzou starters were top 5 players for sure, played 30 minutes or more in the game. The ability to give them rest here, I really believe helped Mizzou down the stretch. And the final defensive play I want to show you here is just how good Mark Mitchell is. We've talked about his defense a lot, but this is a play, perhaps more than any other, that really shows it. Kansas guard is going to come up the floor. They're going to set a back screen on Tony Perkins, and Mark Mitchell is tasked with guarding Kansas ball handler with a full head of steam and an open lane. Look at how well he does. Not only does he corral him, he gets his hand on the shot. Just an incredible job by him. And now we've moved to what we'll call the play of the game. And this is what I was talking about earlier with Mark Mitchell and the big shot. This play, to me, is where the game ended. We're going to roll it forward a little bit here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what Mizzou's doing. Sorry. So we've got a high pick and roll here. Mizzou had done really well using this play against Cal. Kansas adapted to it throughout the game, and they wanted to get the ball out of Anthony Robinson's hands. Mizzou knew that, and I want you to watch what they did. There's a little tweak here. So the way that they were going to get the ball out of Anthony Robinson's hands is they were going to trap him off the screen. Hunter Dickinson hard hedged out and waited for his Anthony Robinson's defender to recover, and they were going to get a trap here. Mizzou smartly brought Tamar Bates up here, knowing that they were going to do that. And what was great about this is you now have a 1, 2, 3, 4 on 3. Mizzou created an advantage here by using Kansas' aggressiveness against them. And when we get to this point, I am certain, I am virtually certain, I should say, that the play design here was for Tamar Bates. And what you're looking at here is Josh Gray getting a seal on KJ Adams. And the play, I believe, was for Tamar Bates to take Store one-on-one, but that's not what happened. We see the pass out again, 2 minutes left, 65, 63, 16 seconds left on the shot clock. Mizzou had scored 9 points in the last 20 possessions. This was a huge momentum play. If Mark Mitchell misses this shot, things could have gotten really airy. And when you look at his shooting percentages, he was 0 for 3 behind the arc before the game or during the game, and he came in shooting about 25%. And he knocks it down. Those are the kind of shots that go down in border war history. We remember the Zaire Taylor last second shot. We remember Marcus Denman scoring, 11, 12 points in the final 3 minutes of the game, including 3 made 3-pointers. To me, this shot goes down among those because when you consider where the game was, the stakes at that point, how Mizzou was performing offensively, and the fact that they needed a big shot, Mark Mitchell stepped up and took the shot. I mean, you got to give him credit for that. It was an incredible moment. It really sealed the deal. Mizzou was up 5 at that point in time. They never were tested again for the rest of the game. So you really have to give strong props not only to Tamar Bates for his 29-point performance, but also that Mark Mitchell jumper. So that's all I have for you tonight. I appreciate you watching. For our new viewers, if you like what you saw, there's going to be a lot more of these coming down the pike. Maybe not every game, but pretty frequently. We've got a bunch of other stuff up. We'll have lineup performance. Matt and Sam will be doing their normal Dive Cuts podcast. We'll have a lot of content about the game and upcoming games. So if you like it, I hope you subscribe. We'd love to have you. We believe we've built a pretty good community over at Rock M Plus. A lot of information, a lot of good discussion, not much BS. If that's your thing, hop on board. If not, I appreciate you watching anyway, and I delight in watching or rewatching the Border War Renaissance with you. So with that said, we'll see you next time, and stay in school.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and the benefits include access to our live podcasts, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcast app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not the Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.